Hello and welcome to the first workshop of 2021. My name is Prisma Garcia and I'm the Director of Capacity Building for Social Venture Partners Dallas. Today we will have a conversation about impact investing, what it is, and how you can get involved. This is not a new concept necessarily, and it's not new to SVP Dallas, but there's a lot of action happening within the space, and we have some great speakers here with us today that are going to give us a little bit more insight about impact investing within from their lens. And so with that, I'll introduce Heather Gilker. She's an SVP partner and the Executive Director of the Southwest Angel Network of North Texas. We also have Gregory Campbell, President and CEO of Rainmaker Inc. We have Avi Deutsch, Principal at Voida Capital, and Juan Thurman, Director of the Southwest Angel Network. And so today we will have the Q&A open throughout the whole time, so feel free to submit questions as the presenters are giving their presentation. And of course, we'll have some questions from the audience later on, but we'll let them have some introductions and then some presentations. I wanted to thank our partners in this, and also our sponsors, Something Good Consulting Group and Ray Knetzer Law Firm, for their continuous support of this programming that we're able to do as a webinar. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to have introductions to Heather Gilker, which is an SVP partner.
Thank you, Prisma. I'm excited to be here today, and thank you all to everyone for attending. I'm just honored to be with this wonderful group of people. My name's Heather Gilker, as Prisma said, and I'm a consultant to families, foundations, nonprofits. I'm an angel, an advisor, especially to women founders, and I'm an impact investor. And I'm really proud to be an SVP partner. So I look forward to visiting with you today about my journey and how I've gotten to this place where I'm excited to be an impact investor and to talk more about it.
Thank you, Heather. Greg, would you mind introducing yourself?
Thank you, Prima. I'm Greg Campbell. I am an angel investor, a VC investor, and a private equity investor. And I got involved in really impact investing almost by accident. Everything I've done over my career now spans about 30 years of investing, has been about impact investing, even though it wasn't called impact investing at that time. I have the pleasure of being able to work in a world where I'm working with very young and somewhat mature deals, but always with a purpose. At Rainmaker, we say that we invest in businesses that are disruptive, scalable, and noble in purpose. And to me, that solidifies what impact investing is. Thank you.
Great. Avi, would you mind jumping in?
Sure. Thanks, Prisma, and thanks for having me here today. I am a principal at Voida Capital. We are a boutique asset management firm based in Massachusetts with an office in New York. And I work with high net worth individuals and multi-generational families to design and manage portfolios that meet their financial goals, but at the same time are aligned with their values and the things that are important to them. We manage money across asset classes with both internal strategies and some external fund managers, specifically in the private equity space. I'm also general partner on our internal venture fund, where we invest in early stage seed companies working in the areas of food and water security, safe aging and access to healthcare, and resource efficiency and circular economy. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for joining us. Juan, how about you give an introduction?
Hi, and good afternoon, Prisma. Thank you very much for inviting me to this talk. I'm looking forward to participating and hearing from everyone involved, and hopefully getting some good questions. So I had a 20-year-long career in technology sales. I worked at very large companies like IBM, and I worked at a number of startups. Most notably, I worked at Twilio out of San Francisco and helped grow that organization. And they IPO'd maybe 3 or 4 years ago. For the last 5 years, I've been an angel investor. I'm a venture partner in Next Gen Ventures, where we invest in technology startups. And then most importantly for the talk today, I'm a director at Swan Impact Network and a general partner at Swan Impact Fund. I've been with the network for about 5 years, and we focus on early stage impact companies. And I currently have 11 impact startup investments personally.
Great, thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. And of course, we know that more and more people are in tune with what's happening around around the globe, and this pandemic has really heightened that awareness of social issues. And so everyone is wanting to do their part, whether that is in volunteerism, philanthropy, or even investing. And so we want to take this time to reflect on, what is impact investing, starting there, and then moving into specific examples. And I know that our audience is quite broad. We have people from all sectors, which is great. We even have some nonprofit leaders and some schools, some investors. So you might be already doing some of this, but feel free, regardless of where you're coming from, what lens you're looking at this from, feel free to submit your questions. Q&A is going to continue to be open, and then we'll get to those after the panelist presentations. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Avi for an Impact Investing 101.
Great, thank you. And Prisma, I think I have 10 minutes here, so I've set my timer. Feel free to cut me off if I'm going over my time. So I've been given the impossible task of telling you everything you need to know about impact investing in 10 minutes. So I'm going to sort of try and run through a bunch of things. Let me share my screen here. Hopefully you all can see this. Panelists, someone give me a thumbs up if you can see this. Great. I wanted to start with the definition, right? And I've chosen to call this values-aligned investing and not impact investing, because I think impact investing is more of a subset of a larger movement, which is the idea that you can align your investment decisions with things that have a positive social or environmental impact in the world alongside a financial return. This is not the official definition. There are a bunch out there, but I like this because it's simple. Put another way, it captures the idea that financial decisions, from where you bank to where you invest to where your 401k is, are all moral decisions that have a real impact in the world. I just want to give a really quick example, because I think impact investing can sometimes, or values-aligned investing, can seem abstract. This is one of our portfolio companies, full disclosure, and they took on the challenge of saying, how are we going to provide protein to the developing world, animal protein, because that's what people want. We clearly can't do it the way we're doing it today. When you look at the number of people in places like China and India that are coming into the middle class, they want to eat animal protein. We can't do it through cattle. And the most efficient form of animal protein is actually aquaculture. So this company said, how can we try and fix this very flawed industry? And they do it using data analytics and genetics and a bunch of different things that highly increase the yield of aquaculture, reduce the use of antibiotics, vaccines, reduce the loss of genetic diversity, et cetera. This is a way of thinking about how we're going to solve this very huge problem of how we're going to feed people in the world using a small tech solution, right, that can make a massive difference in the supply of protein, and specifically on our environment and what it means to try and raise cattle in this world, right? What the impact of cattle on our environment. Impact investing is a very wide field, and I just want to take a second and sort of touch on who the different players that you might want to think of when you think about the world of impact investing. Prisma mentioned we have a lot of different people on this call, so let me just touch on a few of the different players. It starts with the investors, right? The folks who have capital, who are looking to put it to work, and that could be individuals and families. There's this notion that impact investing is something that's primarily for high net worth individuals, or only for people who have a lot of money. And I think there's a place within this spectrum for anyone who's fortunate enough, I should say, in this country, to have a 401k or even a bank account, right? Because within these areas or within every investment account, there are things you can do, and we'll try to talk about some of them. So you've got the asset owners, right? You've got the individuals, the family, retail investors, high net worth individuals. Then you've got the institutional investors, right? Things like pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, some of these larger players. Let's call those the asset owners. In the middle, you've got the intermediaries, right? So most folks don't invest directly in companies, although you'll hear from Juan a different perspective later, but the majority of even Juan Capital, as I imagine, is not invested directly in company, it's invested in fund managers, right? So I'm gonna refer to these as the intermediaries. They can be mutual funds, they can be ETF issuers, et cetera. And then you have the investees, right? Who's actually receiving the invested capital. It could be a social entrepreneur, right? Something that's maybe below market rate, less competitive. It could be a startup that's more competitive, but still has a social or environmental mission. Or it could be a publicly traded company, right, that is trying to adhere to stricter social, environmental, social, and governance, ESG standards. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, right? And then you've got a couple of ecosystem players. You've got field building organizations, things like the Global Impact Investing Network that bring together institutions. You've got Tonic, which brings together individual investors. You have financial advisors, law firms, et cetera. I want to spend a minute on institutional philanthropic organizations because they have a couple of important roles to play within the impact investing space. One is around funding some of the field builders, right? I think that's one very important role. Organizations like the GIN, who have done a lot of work to bring more investors into this space. But another role that foundations can play and have played is in what we think of as catalytic capital. It's creating or experimenting with new forms of investing that maybe are perceived to have higher risk, whether that's true or not, in a foundation that has more flexibility in how it uses either its programmatic money through something called a program-related investment, or its endowment through what we call a mission-related investment, can try and experiment with some of these different different financial investments, some of these different financial tools. Prisma mentioned growth, so I'll just touch on this quickly. I am looking at the entire, this slide is about the entire spectrum of values-aligned investing. So impact investing is, and I'll get to this in a second, is just one small piece of that, right? But when you look at the entire sector, you'll see that almost $1 in $5 in the US today that's invested, right, is in some form of sustainable investing. So we're not talking about niche, and this is from 2018, by the way. I would venture a guess that these numbers are significantly higher today. We've seen a lot of capital come into this space, most of it in the public equity space, but certainly we're seeing movement in public debt and in private equity as well. This is the most confusing slide. I apologize in advance. But this is an attempt to just show just the breadth of investments that we're talking about here. So I'm just going to go from left to right here. And one of the issues that I want to talk about here is this idea of market rate returns. Oops, sorry, I lost my mouse there for a second. Market rate returns versus concessionary returns. You'll hear a lot the conversation in the impact investing space, whether investing in something that has a social impact necessarily means that you're going to accept a lower financial return. So what you have here is a little bit of a spectrum where if we start on the left, you've got traditional investments that are focused on finance only, right? Obviously, there's no expectation that there's going to be a trade-off there. There's no trade-off. That's the benchmark, right? Those are the competitive investments. Then you have this idea of responsible investing. Responsible investing is maybe the first generation of social impact investing. You can trace it back to the apartheid, the anti-apartheid movement, right? Divesting from South Africa, arguably even earlier. And it's a lot about this idea of eliminating risk, taking out companies that operate in areas like tobacco or alcohol or firearms, et cetera. There's a growing body of research today to suggest that responsible and sustainable investing, which are both primarily public market investments, do not carry any sort of, there's no penalty for investing in these types of investments, meaning you can achieve the same levels of returns that you would be achieving in the traditional investments, right? So responsible and sustainable, mostly public equity. Sustainable investing is a lot more focused on ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors. Looking at companies' carbon footprint as an example of environmental, looking at companies' turnovers in family leave and stuff of that sort would be examples of social, and governance would be looking at board independence, penalties for bribes and stuff of that sort. So these are mostly lens that are applied to publicly traded company. In the thematic space is where you typically see more private investments. And I like to think of thematic as attempting to solve a certain issue using a market-based solution. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about more for the rest of the panel. But I started with an example of a thematic investment was to say, let's tackle the issue of food security. If you remember, I mentioned that was one of our focus areas, and we chose to do that within a tech play in the aquaculture space. So that's an example of thematic investing. The question of whether there is a risk or rather a financial concession for investing in thematic investment in the private space, there's no good answer to that. I think anecdotally, there's some evidence to suggest that there isn't. There's only one research paper that's been put out to date on the returns of impact investment funds, private equity funds. It did not show any underperformance, but it's one paper, and there's some issues with it that I'm not going to go into here. And then to the right of that, you have impact first investments, right? You can say, I'm willing to accept trade-off. That's where a lot of foundations come in. And then at the end, we have philanthropic grants, which could be either in issue areas or, like I said, in field building organizations. I'll end with this, just one more example. Again, I don't want it just all to be abstract. This is an ETF. This is the largest ETF in the US, exchange traded fund, right? It mimics a certain, an index that is a basket of stocks. And this is the US's largest ESG fund. So what does it do? Well, it screens out tobacco, controversial firearms, and a few other things. And then it employs metrics like carbon emissions, employee health, board diversity, et cetera. Who are the top holdings? Well, you're probably not inspired, but these are the companies that have highest ESG, the highest ESG scores, and are large cap, obviously. Prisma, I'm almost done, I promise. One of the challenge around ESG is one that large companies tend to perform better because they have more resources to dedicate to reporting. And then two is it's very much in the eye of the beholder, right? Sort of what are you focused on? And that obviously is an issue across the impact investing space or the values aligned investing spectrum. So I'll end with this. Impact investing is certainly for everyone. If you are, or for anyone fortunate to have a bank account or certainly a 401k, there are opportunities. The spectrum is wide. The growing consensus is that you can make impact investments today or values aligned investments today without taking a hit on the financial returns. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi. And I know that we're getting a couple of questions about if this PowerPoint will be shared. And Avi, I guess we'll hear from you if that you're able to send that along or not.
Certainly.
Well, we can have that sent out in the follow-up. But then also, I love the spectrum that you placed. I know a lot of us are visual, and now we're seeing traditional investing and how that falls, and we have philanthropy on the other end. And then I would argue that there would be some traditional and venture philanthropists in that category. I want to remind the audience, we welcome you posting anything on social media with the hashtag SVPD workshop. And of course, continue to submit those questions. The chat is, or the questions are open. And with that, I'm gonna go turn it back to Heather.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And of course, just as soon as you turn it back to Heather, my dog came upstairs with a piece of trash that was like a smelly Whataburger wrapper. So if you saw me grab it and stick it in the trash, I apologize. I just want to build on what Avi had to say and talk about what SVP Dallas has been up to. So for those of you who are partners, big shout out to you. I wish I could see you and say hello. I miss you. I can't wait till we're back together again. I want to talk about what we've been doing and what we are doing. So we've been around for more than 20 years. And I think you could say that we've always been impact investors. If you are giving your time and your talents, you're an impact investor. If you're doing something to make the world a better place, if you are making grants, which SVP Dallas has done. So we've got the nonprofit, the philanthropic work that we've done with the nonprofits, our pro bono consulting. We've made grants, and those have been Catalytic Capital, just as Avi mentioned. And we've also done some really cool things to accelerate some programs that other larger foundations would not have done if we hadn't stepped in to do that. About 4 years ago, we started looking at putting more dollars to work in a for-profit way because we'd done a lot of work with social enterprises as well as nonprofits. And with Big Bang, that gave us a chance to take our Big Bang prize money and turn it from a grant into an equity investment. And we've done that for the last 2 or 3 years. And this past summer, my fantastic portfolio review committee and I spent some time talking about what we can do to get more involved in that. And that led us to some great ideas, initiatives. And the one that we hit on right away that we felt like aligned really well with our values was joining with Swan, which is Southwest Angel Network, which has renamed itself Swan. It was an acronym. Anyway, everybody always uses it as an acronym. And as we look at what Swan does more and more, it's beyond Texas. So Swan Impact Network has been around for over 5 years, as Juan mentioned in his introduction, has made investments in 25 different companies and with about close to $6 million. And there are 55 angels. There's already a process. And we've got partners who are interested in doing that, and we're delighted to be able to offer that opportunity. So I want to talk about this niche. So we're going to get a little bit more specific from the big picture of what Avi's talked about to kind of, so what does that mean if you are an SVP partner, or what is an angel investor? So let me see if I can share my screen. And here we go. And I'll just go through this really quickly in my slide. There we go. Well, oh, I guess I'm trying to click on the screen. Okay, here we go. Sorry. So when you look at the ways that you could be an impact investor, I mentioned the time, the talent, grants, dollars. If you think about being an impact investor as an angel, one of the ways you could do that is you could help your friend or family member by investing in their impact startup, and that happens. You could invest personally through your network with companies and other angels, as some of you may have done already. Obviously, Greg is a great example of this. Avi's probably done this. I'm sure Juan has done this. Or you could join an angel network. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. So an angel investor is an accredited individual, and they tend to invest in early stage private startup companies. And the goal there is to help get those companies to market. So if you look at what Swan is doing, working with pre-revenue through seed, and that's just kind of the space. But what's really cool about it is these are all companies that have to show or check a box around impact. What I love about our values, you'll read this and you'll see there's mission orientation here. We just went through a pitch cycle in the first quarter for Swan Impact Network. And, I think it's just really uncommon, I think, for entrepreneurs to pitch to a group of angels that care about impact. And I think we have to spend some time helping them think about that vocabulary and how they think about it. How do they pitch to us? Because they're not used to that. We are looking to make sure they really care about impact. And when we do our due diligence, that's a big feature of our due diligence is a whole section on impact. And we've got associates that also help us do that due diligence and help vet where we think that impact will be. Here are other reasons why you might want to become an angel investor. Some of these may grab you. I think some of the great things about this is we've got people out there that are already been there, done that, who've got the skill and the expertise you've developed over a lifetime. And I really want to talk to you women out there. I know that there are a number of women who think, I just don't know if I know what to ask. And you might be surprised. I've had women who are public accountants tell me, I just don't really know if I know what to look at. You know more than you think you know. And if you don't, if you spend time around some other angels in some of these meetings, you're going to learn some things. And there's also a great idea and component at Swan that SVP really liked around education. SVP Dallas is all about education, and then so is Swan Impact Network. And it's just a really nice group. And there's also the opportunity to make money, which is kind of nice. So I looked at several different angel networks just for me to join personally. And what I loved about Swan is it is diverse. It's open. It's not a place where you feel like you should sit in the back of the room because everybody knows more than you do. There's really there's just not there's not a dumb question, and it's just a great way to share with others who really care a lot about different things. So these are, we layer in something that we also think is really important. And if you entrepreneurs are out there that are thinking that you'd like to pitch to Swan, we welcome you to apply. We'd love for you to apply. You can go to our website to do so. But one of the things we're going to ask you to do in the application is tell us among one of these categories, these 17 categories, where you think your solution is going to make an impact. And so we find that with Swan Impact Network over the last 4 or 5 years, I'd say over 50% of the deals have been environmental and clean tech. 40% have been medical healthcare. And then the balance have been around different areas around education, no poverty, and good jobs, economic growth, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Juan Thurman to talk about what he's doing. I don't know how I did on my time, Prisma. I hope I was okay.
You did great. Juan, we're up to you next.
Great. Thank you very much, Prisma. I appreciate it. Also, quick thank you to Avi and Heather. As I said in my opening remarks, I was hoping that we could all learn a little something, and I definitely have. So I appreciate that from both of you. As Avi said, it's kind of a new concept, this impact investing, and it is in the eye of the beholder. So I encourage you to take notes and think about what we're saying, and also keep exploring for yourself what it means to you. So what I wanted to do is give you some examples, some concrete examples of what impact investing means to Swan Impact Network. So as Heather said, our mission is to make the world a better place, and we do it by supporting startups that are addressing serious challenges that our society faces. And we need those companies to have measurable impact and also a plan for financial success. And what that means in general, as Heather pointed out, is that we tend to invest in health tech, med tech, clean tech, edutech, and then this broad category that we call cause tech, or companies who are addressing other social causes like empowering women, empowering not-for-profits, et cetera. So to give you a broad sense, I picked 3 companies that I wanted to highlight. Well, the other thing I want to highlight also is that we're also very interested in supporting underrepresented founders. It's part of our ethos, it's part of what we do. And up to now, 50% of our investments all have leadership that is underrepresented. So I want to give you 3 broad examples from our portfolio of 25 plus companies to give you a sense of the kinds of companies that we support so far. So the first is Accelerist. And the CEO and co-founder is Brittany Hill. She had a long career as a corporate social responsibility officer and a fundraiser for nonprofits. And she decided to turn her experience into a SaaS platform that helps nonprofits understand their supporters and therefore form more rewarding partnerships with their corporate partners. She's been around for about 4 years, doing very well. They just raised a follow-on round here, I guess about 4 months ago. And they work with customers like National Parks Foundation and the Children's Miracle Network to better understand the people who support them and who also support some of their corporate partners, and how they could build programs together that are beneficial to everyone. One of my favorite examples there was it turns out that they did a little project for Whataburger. It turns out Whataburger has been giving money to, I think, Children's Miracle Network for over 60 years, and none of their customers knew it. And, you know, I like a hamburger like anybody else does, but knowing that they're giving to Children's Miracle Network, and I'm sorry, I think it's Dairy Queen, but anyway, it makes me feel better about that purchase. And that's the kind of insight that her company provides on the SaaS platform. The second company I want to highlight is Scriptly RX, and they were part of Big Bang earlier in the year. And the CEO there is Danny Corprew, and he's a Black founder who used to work at the Houston Department of Health and Human Services. And there he saw firsthand how a number of the people who took advantage of those services had to make this trade-off between buying food and buying medicine. And so what he did is he launched Scriptly RX to partner with food banks and similar organizations to offer discounted prescriptions to their constituents. And as I said before, he pitched a Big Bang, and he did a really great job. He's continuing to grow his business and offer more partnerships and more ways for people to take advantage of his offering. And then lastly, I want to talk about Harmonic Bionics, and I want to talk about them because they're kind of top of mind right now, and I'll tell you why. The CEO there is Chris Prentice. Their technical co-founders are Mak Yoon and Ashish Deshpande, who are PhD mechanical engineers from University of Texas, Austin. Mook, growing up in South Korea, he experienced one of his relatives have a stroke, and he saw the tough road to rehabilitation that individual had to go through. And when he went to school to get his PhD in robotics, he decided that maybe he could bring that set of experiences to bear to this problem. And I think Avi was talking about this, focusing on these areas. So he really focused on stroke and stroke rehabilitation with his knowledge in robotics. And so they created this technology that makes recovering from upper body mobility issues after a stroke more efficient and patient specific. They are currently raising a $6 million A round. They have a lead investor, and they expect to be in the market by 2022. And they currently have 3 test robots that are in service now, proving out how these robots can benefit folks who have suffered this injury and this issue. So I hope that was helpful in terms of understanding kind of some of the companies that we think about when we think about impact investing. And I welcome your questions. Thank you, Prisma.
Thank you, Juan. You know, we do have some questions coming in, but we'll wait until after Greg gives us a short presentation about his work. And I know that he's had experience, you know, as an impact investor, and is looking at a couple of different things he was mentioning to me. So let's turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, Prisma. Again, thank you for having me today. I want to underscore some of the things that Avi mentioned. First of all, that impact investing is for everyone. You do not have to label yourself an impact investor. There's no set of special skills or special funds or anything else you have to have. If you're an investor or you can influence investment, you can be an impact investor. Secondly, impact investing is growing. It's growing at huge leaps and bounds. It's probably one of the fastest growing sectors or segments in the investment industry. It is international, it's domestic, it's in your neighborhood, it's wherever you can think of investing taking place, it's all over. And then finally, something that I really want to emphasize is that you do not have to sacrifice returns in order to be an impact investor. Many people shy away from impact investing, particularly if you're in an institutional side, saying, I still have to deliver the returns that are required by my limited partners or by my institution or my other investors. You can still be an impact investor and still be able to deliver against your return goals. Now, I'm going to make an assumption that those that are in the audience fit into one of 3 buckets. You're either an individual investor or a potential investor. You're currently involved in a fund or family office, or you're a corporate influencer, which means that you may be working at a corporation and you can influence how the dollars or the resources of that corporation are invested. And I want to talk about my own personal experience across those spectrums. As I mentioned before, I have been a private equity investor, and a small fund raised $27 million, invested that across people of color and in the Southern Dallas area, because that's where we felt that we could have the greatest impact. And I can say to you that we were able to settle in the top quartile in terms of returns. So you can invest private equity in deals with people of color, with women, and in geographical areas that don't see huge amounts of private equity, and still be able to hit your return goals. As an angel investor, I've invested in the United States and South America, West Africa, and still have been looking at ways that we can impact education, impact access to financial tools, and impact access to healthcare in a variety of different ways. And I currently have about 23 private investments in my angel portfolio. And most currently, over the last year or so, I formed with some other partners down in Houston, a VC focused in healthcare. We're investing in genomic testing, health IT, patient engagement, and medical devices. The unique thing about this group is that we're probably the most diverse GP group probably in Texas. And we think, being able to be a diverse management group is also talking about impact investing. I can take it back a little further. During my corporate career, I spent a number of years with the PepsiCo organization. Shout out to any of those who are in our audience who are part of the Pepsi Mafia, is what we call ourselves. This time period allowed me, in the positions that I was in, to influence where dollars went to. And I was able to have a very strong directional impact on procurement, on hiring, on the customers we served, and the products that we developed. So wherever you happen to find yourself within the spectrum of individual investor, those who might be institutional investors who might be able to fund funds, and those who are in corporations, you can have a dramatic impact on impact investing, no matter where you're sitting. I want to spend a little time now talking a little bit about where I see impact investing going. The new impact investing is all about social justice. It's about diversity. And the sooner you get that message and understand that, if you didn't get it over the last 12 months, I don't know if you're going to get it, but the new impact investing is about social justice, is about diversity. We haven't talked about it in this session. I know we have talked about it in previous conversations, but the amount of money going to diverse deals is very, very small. African-American women, Latina women, women in general have been at the short end of the stick in terms of receiving investment capital for deals. People of color in general have been at the short end of the stick in receiving money for deals. I want to highlight a deal here locally for us that I happen to sit on the board of, Canaries. Many of you may know Canaries. Canaries is one of my favorite deals, led by Mandy Price and Star, her other co-founder. Canaries is a company that started by African-American women and one guy, and they are digitizing equity, diversity, and inclusion for corporations. So here you have a double impact. You have a company that is about the business of creating the change that we need in society around equity, and it happens to be led by two African-American women here in our community. A perfect example. I'm very, very proud to sit on that board and to be an investor in that company. Another company I'm going to highlight is another example of a company that has spent about 3 years searching for capital, a company called Goal Setters. And Goal Setters, Avi, is a company that's down the street from you, actually headquartered in Brooklyn. Goal Setters was started by a young lady by the name of Tanya. I won't give her last name now. But Tanya has spent about 3 years building a company that is involved in improving the financial literacy of young people, of kids. And what was interesting to me was following the history of goal setters, you found a company that had pursued capital in the normal ways of angels and then institutional investors who were told that nobody would invest in literacy, financial literacy for young people. And at the same time, they went ahead and invested in some companies that were led by white males who did exactly the same thing. Fast forward, now you see that goal setters came back around, and through some other very strong efforts, led initially by the philanthropic community, they've now closed out a $3.5 million round, and they're poised now to really change the way financial literacy is being done and delivered to children here. The next one I just want to highlight is an example of how you can link impact investing and community issues. I happen to sit on the board of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce in New York City. And we have just signed an MOU with an organization called the West Harlem Innovation Network. Well, that network is led by a very strong venture capital pioneer, I'll just say. He's been in venture capital probably about 25 years. And the objective there is to set up platform companies in fintech, life sciences, ed tech, and amalgamated technologies, and to have several of those companies go public in the next several years. The key thing here that unites it with the community is they're not only building these companies in Harlem, they are also have a goal to hire 70% of the employees from that community. It's a different approach and a very, very exciting effort. In fact, when I get off today's call, I'll be jumping onto their board call. But again, different ways that you can approach impact investing. There's a lot of exciting things that are going on today that everybody can be a part of. I am working now with a very broad group that covers most of the major cities across the United States, where we're looking at how do we particularly focus on improving the investment opportunities for people of color. And not only that we're trying to get investment to those companies, but also how do we now charge those companies to focus their procurement, their hiring, to make sure that they're bringing in members of the community into those organizations. So I'm going to stop here, Prisma, because I could go on for days in terms of different companies, both here in the United States and West Africa and in South America, where impact investing is very much the norm that I'm involved with, and happy to share any other thoughts later on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that, the questions are coming in, and I want to be sure to address those. I know that, you mentioned, Greg, one of the organizations that we actually at SVP has supported, Canaries, and I know that some of our partners have made a second investment in that group. Of course, I don't know if our audience, everyone is aware, Big Bang is a social innovation conference, and for the last 5 years, we've had a pitch competition. I know Heather mentioned that slightly, and we've invested in Canaries, on the road lending, Credit Mountain just recently, and so this is something that is not new, and we're trying to pick up more people along the way. In addition, creating even a Dallas Impact Investing Network, which maybe Heather can tell us a little bit more about. And in terms of the questions in the audience, there was one that I wanted to jump to, because I know that we talked about impact investing, and then we had Heather and Juan tell us a little bit about angel investors, and I think there's some confusion maybe. And so Avi, I don't know if you could share maybe just the key difference between an angel investor and impact investing, or maybe the similarities.
Yeah, sure. I would maybe choose values-aligned investing, just to sort of start with the broadest definition, right? If you invest your 401k into socially responsible funds, I would say you are, a part of this ecosystem. Going further in, impact investing usually refers to private investments, mostly. So I would say if you're doing impact investing, you're probably doing private investments. You could be doing private investments, meaning investments that are not listed on a public exchange. You could do direct impact investments into companies. And if you're doing that as an individual, you are an angel investor. And the other way you could do impact investing is through a fund. You can invest in a fund and invest directly in companies. Those would both be considered impact investing. But angels invest specifically in typically early stage startups that have a social or environmental mission, if they're impact angel investors.
Oh, great. I don't know if Heather or Juan have anything else to add, but I thought that was a very clear definition. And in terms of where do we begin, I know that we're hearing, we're hearing from the audience and even myself, like, okay, well, there were a couple comments that were addressed, like, you don't have to, you could be doing it and you may not even know it. You don't have to be the wealthiest of individuals. So how do you start, right? How does one start? There's a question from the audience that says, what is the minimum amount? I think maybe there is, not necessarily that given in certain circumstances, but I don't know if Greg or, any of the other panelists want to jump in and answer that question.
Well, in terms of minimum amounts, there is no minimum amount. You can start with wherever you are. And again, depending on where you are in the spectrum of the life of investment, if you're investing your own personal money, if you're investing your 401k, and you can invest it in spaces that can have an impact in the community. There are certain funds that are set up so you can do that. If you're an investor in, let's say you're an angel investor, someone that has the ability to invest small amounts, you just have to identify those companies that are on a mission or having an impact in an area that you care about. So one of the things that I usually tell people who are early on in their investment career is to figure out where you want to have an impact. If you want to have an impact on education, that's where you should put your money. If you want to have an impact on culture, that's where you should have it. That's where you should invest your money. If you want to have an impact on diversity, call up Mandy and get some money working with Canaries here locally. And if you can't figure out where it should be, there are so many places where you can get help through SPV, through the Communities Foundation of Texas here locally. There are a lot of places that can help you get started in that process. If you're a private investor, you can get started by just looking around you. What type of companies are out there? If you want to get involved with Juan or Heather with Swan, they certainly can direct you to the right kinds of companies where you can put your money to work and be assured that you're going to have the impact that you desire.
Does anyone else have anything to add there?
Yeah, Prisma, if I could jump in.
Sure.
Let me just echo a couple of things that Greg said and then tie it in with a question I see here on the Q&A. So first of all, I think Greg is right on. The very first thing you should do is figure out what kind of value or what kind of impact investor you want to be and find out where your interests are. And then secondly, and I want to get real pragmatic and give you some black and white figures. The very easiest way to start is to do this crowdfunding. So someone asked about how crowdfunding works and so if you want to actually put dollars to work, like literal dollars, the easiest and fastest and least expensive way is crowdfunding. And a lot of these platforms have the ability that you can search for the kinds of things you're interested in. So if you're interested in community banks, let's say, or you're interested in farm-to-table restaurants, you could search for that in those apps. And I think most of those apps, I think the minimum is $100 to get started. I think that's what it is. Now, in terms of angel investing, and I'm going to go with Swan in particular, if you want to be an angel investor at Swan, first of all, the bare minimum is $0. You can join Swan and never invest in your entire life. We don't encourage that because you said you want to be an investor, you probably should invest, but we don't force you to do anything. But the bare minimum in our deals is $5,000, and that's a good way to get started. Put some money to work, and what we find and what I find personally is once you put money to work, it sort of forces you to learn more about the company, learn more about the industry, learn more about the competitors. So it's a good forcing function.
I just also want to jump on something that Greg said, and I think I'm really proud of SVP, and I think sometimes it's also a little bit of luck. So in 2019, Canaries one big bang, and we made a $25,000 equity investment through SVP Dallas Impact Inc., which is a for-profit entity. And it came back around. We got to watch Canaries just really take off. Mandy was just so gracious with her time and spent time giving us updates, and also spent time helping to educate our Dane and Jewett residents about what's going on in diversity and what's going on in their world. And we had an opportunity to, invest again in the next round. And Mandy was just absolutely fabulous. I called her up and I said, look, I know you don't have to do this, but I think it would be wonderful if we had the opportunity to see if our partners wanted to come in and invest alongside SVP Dallas in a special purpose vehicle. And so we were able to do that last December. And actually we did that outside of Swan. So that was outside of Swan's normal cycle. That kind of helped us understand that there is a desire, there is some demand among our partners to do more of this. So we created something that we call the Impact Inc. partner level. So it's a step up, a slight step up from our regular level. And that allows our members to be members of Swan Impact Network. But also we hope that we'll have other opportunities like a Canaries over the course of the year to invest in things that maybe it's hyper local, maybe it's a project, a finance deal, a real estate project, or maybe it's just something that's off cycle, et cetera. So we're excited about that opportunity, and that has just that helped us solidify the notion that there was really some demand there, and that this is something that we should do. So we're really excited about that.
Thank you, Heather, for adding to that. I know that there's a specific question from the audience about ESG and how that initiative is taken off, right? And I think that Avi, you had this in your presentation, and I'm sure others, have some comments around that. But how much is this ESG emphasis, marketing purposes, telling investors maybe what they want to hear versus actual result and impact. And so that question, I want to throw it out there. I know that there's several other questions from the audience that lead to impact measurement. And, I think that's going to be the question as well. Other than the return side of it, we're also looking at how are we actually changing the world? How are we putting our money to work for good? So I don't know if someone, I'm not going to point fingers at this one, but whoever wants to jump in first. I know, Avi, you had in your PowerPoint, so maybe you can start, but other than that, feel free to jump in.
Sure. ESG is very deeply flawed a process world. I don't know how to describe it. There are a number of issues with it. One, yes, a lot of it is marketing, and I sort of alluded to that when I said that large companies tend to have better ESG scores, not necessarily because they deserve them, but because they have more money to spend on reporting. That's one issue. The other issue is that ESG, a lot of different metrics of ESG don't take into consideration what the company is doing, right? So they're only looking at how they're doing it, but not necessarily what they're doing. So a big oil company could have a better ESG score from a healthcare company, right? Not that healthcare companies can't be not great, but so it's definitely a very challenged area. I think my recommendation would be, if you have the capacity, you can build a model. There's increasing amount of data out there from third parties that is better data, more verified data, and you can build your own sort of evaluation model that looks at the things that you think are important and doesn't rely entirely, though it's hard to get away from it completely, but at least you're adding in additional resources that are not reported by the company. The other thing is there are a lot of organizations out there today that do the scoring for you. So you can look at a Sustainalytics, which was bought by Morningstar recently, or an MSCI, or there are a bunch out there who actually provide ranking and scoring, and you're basically paying them to sift through some of the nonsense out there and get you better information. Is it perfect? No. It's certainly far from perfect, but I think it's moving in the right direction. And even the fact that companies are forced to report on these things and forced to have policy around things like women in senior management and how many meetings are run by women and stuff of that sort is driving change in the right direction.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything else to add for that question? Well, and that's important to know, because I know that even as a consumer, and this is a little bit different, but even as a consumer, that we can be looking at companies and where we spend our money, right? So I do think that there are things out there. It doesn't seem like there's a perfect match. So for those that are asking specifically, like, how do you pick this? How do you pick a cause? I mean, I think that some of it is personal choice, maybe. But in terms of the in terms of the, impact investments, I know that we have a question from the audience specifically around like this potentially being some sort of experiment, and and I want to understand that question, because I think about it from the community standpoint, right? Well, maybe when we say impact investing, then maybe there's also, I don't want to say negative, but maybe there's also a different connotation, right? And so, specific to this question, I don't know if anyone wants to share their viewpoint on, how, because it's not necessarily like, you're talking to the people at the apartment complexes maybe, or the children, but there are impact investments that affect, the education sector, homelessness, affordable housing, all of those sectors. And so, if anyone, Greg, I think you might have something to add there. I see you smiling. And so, if you want to address, the community part of it, because, we give grants, we make grants, right? We don't necessarily go out and tell people we're making a grant. So Greg, I don't know if you have anything to add there in terms of community.
Well, I'll shape it in a couple of different ways. One, there is a suspicion in the community if you show up and you're making a grant or you're investing in a company, and they say, what are you getting out of this? How are you going to control? How are you going to end up controlling my business or controlling my community? And one of the things you have to do if you're going to be involved in impact investing, particularly as a group or as a fund or as an institution, this can't be a spot effort. This has to be a long-term commitment that you're making. You're going into impact investing in a particular area, you're going to be doing it for a long time. Impact investing isn't something that you do completely at arm's length. This is investing in people, particularly early on in the process. You got to get to know the people that are on the other side of your dollar bill. If you're stretching out your hand with a dollar bill and somebody's receiving, you got to know the person on the other hand, so you can break down some of those suspicions. I have been, even as I said before, I've been involved in impact investing before I knew it was impact investing. So when I first started out doing impact investing, my office was on Martin Luther King Boulevard, down in South Dallas, because I was running a management consulting firm from that office. And my impact investing I was investing in small community businesses around that were on both sides of me and across the street. I was investing small dollars in a hamburger chain. I was investing small dollars in a dry cleaners because I thought that those were important to the community, and developed a relationship with those people and actually did very well on each one of those investments. It's very, very important that the impact investing that you do, one, you get engaged with people. Two, that you're doing it for the long term. So you're not, today I'm an impact investor and tomorrow I'm not. So it's a commitment. It's something you do over the long term. And it's something that, just like you do with any other investments, you get to know the management teams, you get to know the people behind the deal.
Anyone else? Heather, you have anything to add there?
I took myself off mute because I just wanted to add one thing. I think your question was framed as, is this just an experiment? And I will tell you that back to Avi's point about how long this has been around. I think if you look at churches and synagogues and mosques and their organizations, they've been the earliest impact investors. And not just with negative screens, but they have been building and doing what they can to support communities all over the world And so they are some of the earliest impact investors. I don't think this is just an experiment. I think this is an evolution. And I think if you look at where we stand today, in terms of how to make it more concrete, to Avi's point with ESG, there are problems with ESG, and yet ESG can be a very effective negative screen because governance is the G. And if you're looking for some indexes that have outperformed in times of trouble, the ESG index can really outperform. I mean, it missed, it was not invested in a couple of the companies like Experian that had the huge identity theft where millions of people had their identity stolen because there was something in their governance that caused them to get screened out. So ESG can be a good negative screen. And I will tell you that impact investors don't think of it as a positive screen necessarily, but a negative screen. So those are just a couple of the disparate things that I wanted to say.
Great. And with that, Heather, how can more of these participants here on this call learn more about impact investing?
Well, I did see one question. I want to take one big picture question first. So someone wanted to know how to get more education on financial literacy. And to Greg's point, maybe they could go look up goal setters and maybe subscribe. If you are a client of a large broker dealer like a Fidelity or a Vanguard or a Schwab, I guarantee you they have spent a lot of time and money on their websites where you can go and consume more education. If you want more education around impact investing, Avi and Greg and Juan have mentioned the GIN, which is the Global Impact Investor Network, and Tonic. And those are different websites where you could go just to kind of get the big picture on this. And then if you want more education about being an impact angel investor, as I mentioned earlier, Swan is very good at providing education, and it's open to entrepreneurs, students, and potential angel investors. And you can go to the Swan website to check that out. It's www.swanimpact.org. And there's actually an Angel 101 webinar tomorrow. If you're interested, let me know, send Prisma your information and I'll send you that. But I think that, and I will say that education-wise, everybody needs to get educated, right? Think about the wisdom that you can learn from Gregory. If you're an entrepreneur, about what are the lessons learned, how to put something together. Wow, I wish I had known that. I could have put my pitch together differently, or maybe I would have put my business plan together differently. So there's a lot of wisdom to be had, and it's available, and I hope everybody will take advantage of it if they're interested.
Great. And any other recommendations? Here we're talking investing literacy is what one audience member mentioned, technical skills, and just how to learn more. Any other recommendations from any of the panelists?
Yeah, this is Juan. I think it's like any other thing, is you got to start with where am I now and where can I build to next? So I think Avi mentioned it and Greg did as well. Like kind of where I started my my journey here is investing in public equities, and that was my first education. Is like, how does this work? What makes good investments and what makes bad investments? What am I interested in? And so I would think about where are you, what's your end goal, and what's available to you. And as Heather said, like if you open it, so I'm at E-Trade, so you open a small account at E-Trade or Schwab, wherever, take advantage of the education they give you there. Look for websites. I'm also a member, I've been a member for like 25 years, maybe 30 years now at Motley Fool, where they provide investor education. So I go over there, read articles. What are people thinking? Why is this a good one and a bad one, right? And then, as Heather said, take advantage of the people in your network, right? If you're lucky enough to have an Avi or a Greg in your network, and they give you 5 or 10 minutes, and write down some questions that you think would be interesting to know, and ask them and get that information. But start with who you are, have a goal in mind, and then build and take advantage of whatever's available to you. And then there's obviously this formal education that I think a couple of us on the call have formal education. I got an MBA at UT, and super. I mean, just really, really helpful.
Prisma, maybe 2 quick points, if I may.
Sure.
One is there's a fantastic guide that I like by the Case Foundation. You can easily Google it, just Case Impact Investing Guide. It's from 2015, but I still think it's highly relevant for folks who are looking to do more on the thematic impact investing. Great framework. That's point number 1. Point number 2, if you do have a financial advisor, I strongly encourage you to bug them constantly about impact investing. And the reason I say that, 1, is because it's going to help bring your portfolio to where you want it to be, but 2, because the institutions who manage large pools of money in this country, be that big banks or big brokerage firms, the Schwabs, Fidelities in the world, respond to pressure, right? And if the more they hear from their clients that they are looking for impact investments or values-aligned investments, the more progress we're going to see. And that's where the large pools of money are. So bug them.
I want to add one other thing. The ACA Association, which is the National Angel Association, has also got some good education for those of you who are interested in Angel 101.
Great. Oh, and Avi, you didn't mention your, isn't there a newsletter that your group does or something like that?
We have a blog that goes out twice a month roughly, so all welcome to subscribe.
Greg, anything that you would like to add there?
The only thing that I say is read, and read some more. There is no plateau to financial education, and the language of business is finance. If you're going to be an impact investor or any other kind of investor, just read about those who have been successful in the space that you want to participate in.
Great. And I think that, our audience, they've been submitting all these great questions, and I know there are a lot of resources, and we'll try to put those together. But in terms of, just as a question, going back to the impact, and of course at SVP, we're looking to work with nonprofits, for-profits. We do pro bono consulting. And Greg, you touched on this a little bit about how it's, it's almost like generational, right? It's not like you just do this and it's going to be solved. And I see that also within grant making, right? We make grants to nonprofits and they're out doing the work, but that's, only part of it, right? It's only part of this ecosystem. And so, I think a lot of the people on the call are wanting to know, just, everyone wants to do good. And so do you think, or what is the sizable dent that impact investing can make on some of these social problems? And I just throw that out there for everyone. I know Greg is about to jump in, but that really is what people want to know, right? I think the return side of it, we get it, we can make money and do good, but people want to do more, especially after, almost 12 months in a global pandemic.
Well, it's not only just being in the global pandemic, it's the Greg Floyd issues. It's all the things that we have gone through in the last couple of years as a country. Where we put our money makes a really big difference. And it doesn't matter whether it's $1 or it's $100 million. If you're putting your money, you're voting. And every time you vote, you're voting in the direction to align your interests with what the other companies and what other elements are doing in this country. If you're in the philanthropic space, you have the opportunity now to make a significant difference. For those of you who have not had the opportunity, please go back and look at some of the editorials that Darren Walker at the Ford Foundation has written over in the last couple of months about how you can make a difference from the philanthropic standpoint. In our own community here in Dallas, there is a program that I can't talk about yet, but I am playing a role in, where we're bringing together a number of foundations, hospital systems, and other community organizations to target very specific zip codes in our community that have been behind in many of the social determinants of health, where they have a life expectancy that may be 10, 15, 20 years behind other zip codes that are right next to them. And we can make a difference through the philanthropic community, through the business community, by helping to bring change into those environments. And some of those investments are going to be certainly funding nonprofit organizations and setting up direct services. But a lot of it also involves bringing, making investments in private companies in those communities to be able to enhance employment and enhance services to citizens that are just like us, other Dallas citizens. So stay tuned. Probably in the next 3 to 4 months, we'll be able to have a major public announcement, but this is happening right now with a number of foundations and community organizations here.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Otherwise, we're going to begin to wrap up our session today.
I'll add a little bit to, I think we had a couple questions around measuring success and how that affects the community. And this is something we wrestle with and talk about all the time at Swan Impact Network. And so one of the, the challenging things, this is very exciting, impact investing, but one of the challenging things as an impact entrepreneur is that you have two bottom lines now. Not only do you have to do this, bring this great return to your investors, you also have to prove to them that you're making an impact. And that's what we expect at the network. But in terms of the actual success and how it's measured, so first of all, it's very, very difficult to measure, as Avi was talking about ESG. In all these fields, it's fairly difficult to measure. But what we do is we ask the entrepreneurs themselves to come up with a measurement stick. So they tell us. And so on the environmental side, it tends to be a little bit easier, right? So it's tons of CO2 saved, it's water saved, it's energy saved. And so that's helpful. On the health tech side, gets a little bit murkier, but lives saved, visits to the ER saved, that sort of thing is what we're looking at. And that's how we measure success, is how do they do against those set goals that they put forth. And what we do is we ask for quarterly reporting, both on the financial side and on the impact side.
Great. Avi, Heather, any closing words from you?
I'm just excited to be here today. I think that to Greg's point too, though, if you think about putting yourself, there are definitely things that you can't invest in for a profit and make the world a better place. You need to do grants. But if there can be a way for us to create ways that are sustainable to invest in problems, to get to some of these root causes. And sustainable means this company can have a bottom line that allows them to invest dollars and keep going, so they're not out just raising money the next year. There's something exciting about that. And we're just excited to be in that spot at SVP Dallas to look at a number of those different opportunities and to bring a more robust way to look at that. We want to be at the center of impact investing in Dallas. And it's just been so exciting. I've learned so much from everybody here today. Thank you.
Prisma, I would, if I could leave the participants with one message, it would be the idea that just like all important decisions in life, financial decisions are moral decisions. And where you bank, someone had a comment about that, whether you're banking with an institution that has a history of redlining or a credit union or a community development finance institution, that makes a difference. Where your 401k is invested, that makes a difference. And certainly if you have influence over larger pools of capital and where they are invested, that can make a huge difference in the world. So it's something to consider whenever you're making a financial investments, and there's something here for everyone.
Yeah, well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. I know that there might be more questions coming up, and feel free to email me directly, and I can make sure to send them to the panelists and get their insight. So My email is pgarcia@svpdallas.org, so you can feel free to send an email to me if you think of something down the road. But thank you to all of our panelists. This has been a great discussion for, what is impact investing. We're seeing more of it. It's been there, but maybe more individuals want to get involved. And I think that there have definitely been some viable options for everyone in our audience today. And so with that, we're going to wrap up today and give you a little bit of your time back. I did want to remind the audience that SVP, I mentioned earlier, we do pro bono consulting. We actually have an application open for social impact organizations. You could be a for-profit, nonprofit. If you have some other different status, you can reach out to me and we can see where you fit in. But that application is open this entire month. It closes on the 26th, and it's the best way for organizations to get involved with pro bono consulting and our partners serving as those advisors and consultants. And so check it out. It's on our website. Of course, we're going to continue to have a response session. We'll have one coming up in the next couple of weeks about healthcare response. And so you'll see more about that on our social media and emails as well. And of course, I want to thank once again Something Good Consulting Group and Wright Knatzer Law Firm and all of our panelists here today. You're welcome to share any tidbits of information or screenshots, whatever you have on social media using the hashtag SVPD workshop. And of course, we'll be back with another workshop in the coming weeks. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.